Good morning and welcome to the 2015 Impact Fund Awarded Administrator Technical Assistance webinar. I am Nancy Slatsveen. Nira, Nick, Leanne, and I will be going over a variety of program information today. I will be covering information about your 2015 funding agreement and how to find program information on our website. Nira will go over program manual, general program information, and requirements. Leanne's going to cover program forms and disbursement information, and Nick will go over reporting requirements and monitoring. Okay. Minnesota Housing's mission is, housing is a foundation for success, so we collaborate with individuals, communities, and partners to create and preserve and finance affordable housing. Let's get started by going over your impact funding agreement. You should have received your agreement in early December. It was sent to the executive director of your organization. Unless you've made special arrangements, all funding agreements were to be executed and returned to Minnesota Housing by February 1st. Your 2015 RFP application, your funding agreement, and the Impact Fund procedure manuals are all linked together. You are required to adhere to all three. In many cases, funding was approved for less than what you applied for. If that is the case, your funding agreement governs. Please make sure that you understand your agreement. We'll get into sections of the agreement in a minute. Also, please take the time to read the Impact Fund procedure manual before you start your project or program. Let's go through a few important sections in the agreement, but please read through the whole agreement, not just these sections. First, in the upper right-hand corner of the agreement, you'll find your agreement ID number. This number is specific to your award, and you'll need to use it on all correspondence. We track award ID numbers, so please keep it handy. Also at the top is a termination of availability date. This is the date your agreement expires. You have 20 months to complete your award, which is August 1st of 2017. In the next few slides, we'll go over the other sections. If you were awarded funds from Greater Minnesota Housing Fund or Metropolitan Council, you'll receive an agreement directly from them. Our funding agreement does not include their funding or program requirements. Let's start with section 2.01, Reservation of Funds. In this section, you'll find the type and amount of funds that you were awarded. Funds are broken down into a variety of funding types, such as grants, 30-year deferred loans, bond proceeds, and interim construction loans. Make sure that you understand not only how much money you were awarded, but also the type of funds and the dollar amount for each. Section 2.03, General Use of Impact Fund Dollars. In this section, provides specific information approved by Minnesota Housing's board. You cannot deviate from this. It includes the number of units that are required to complete the award, description of your target area, which may be a city, a neighborhood, or a county, the maximum income limits specific to your program, total administration fee or administrator fee that was awarded if it's applicable to your program, and any additional information that may be provided also in this section. As I said before, not all activities or dollars requested were funded. Funding amounts and unit numbers may have been reduced, so please make sure that you understand what was funded and refer back to your agreement throughout the term of your award. Section 2.05 discusses state contracting requirements. You should follow your own recording retention requirements, but the Impact Fund files must be available for review for not less than 6 years from the completion date of the award. The completion date is the date when the award is done and all reporting is complete and submitted to Minnesota Housing. So assuming you complete your award in the 20 months as it's required, in this case August 2017. So to comply with the section 2.05, you need to keep the Impact Fund files available for a potential audit until at least August of 2023. Section 10.11 is about program reporting requirements. Nick's going to go over the reporting a little more in detail in a little bit. In January, you must submit an annual report for each award that you have open. We also require a mid-year report, which is due in July. The mid-year report shows us how you are progressing with your 2015 award. We'll email you the report in June and let you know of the exact due date. If you have an open award from a prior award, you are familiar with the annual reporting requirements. Annual reports are due the end of January each year. Section 10.12, Additional Requirements and Reporting. Many awards have additional requirements listed in this section. Please read this section carefully. If you have any questions about your agreement, please give us a call. Our contact information is at the ends of the slides. So let's move on to the Impact Fund webpage. Go to our webpage at www.mnhousing.gov. Once on our home page, click on Community Development. Click on Impact Fund under the bar near the top. Once on the Impact Fund page, scroll down to the lower part. Here you'll find the Procedural Manual, Program Forms and Income Limits, Training Information, and the Single Family Green Communities information. Click on the plus sign to expand each section, allowing you to access the information within each. If you have a supply of old forms and documents, please recycle them and use the current forms that we have on the website. Now Nira is going to talk about program requirements. Please hold on a second while we switch speakers. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. This is Nira. I'm going to highlight some of the key program requirements. Program requirements can be found in our Impact Fund Procedural Manual, which is on our website. The Procedural Manual includes information about administrators' responsibilities and warranties, household eligibility, property eligibility, eligible activities, general award administration, and finally, funding type specific requirements. I want to highlight some recent Impact Fund changes that were made in the Procedural Manual in 2015. First, definitions were revised to be consistent with the definitions in the funding agreements and for clarity. Second, the definition of owner-occupants was clarified to include households that purchase a property subject to a contract for deed. We also clarified affordability gap assistance, regarding what administrators must assess in considering a household's housing to income ratio. The administrator must also submit a written request for layering funds in Minnesota Housing Impact Fund awards. A written request must be provided and a request must be made and approval by Minnesota Housing must be provided before funds can be layered. We will talk more about layering later on in the webinar. First, I'd like to talk about household eligibility. There are two key requirements for household eligibility. First, the property must be the principal residence of the homeowner or home buyer, and the homeowner or home buyer must occupy the home. Second, households must have a low or moderate income that does not exceed 115% of the area median income. We'll talk about this more in a little bit. On this slide, you'll see the front page of a relatively new eligibility income worksheet. You may use this form to assist in calculating annualized gross household income. It's a guide that walks you through the various types of income to include, such as how to consider self-employed individuals. This worksheet is not required, but if you do choose to use it, please keep it in your project file. It'll be helpful for monitoring later on. The current income limits can be found on the Impact Fund website under the Forms and Income Limits section. You will find a link to the program's income limits and eligibility income worksheet. This area is highlighted in pink here. These are the current income limits which came into effect March 31st, 2015. Some of the current income limits went down from 2014, so make sure you're using the current and correct income limits. There are separate income limits for the Twin Cities metro area, the Rochester MSA, and the balance of the state. These income limits may be different from other Minnesota housing programs, so make sure that you're using these income limits and not the income limits for other programs. We also expect that the income limits will change this spring when HUD releases its 2016 income limits. We will send an e-news when this occurs, but please check the website regularly to ensure that you're using the most current income limits. Next, I'll talk about some general award administration rules, including eligible program costs, layering prohibition, and maximum per unit investments. First, there are two types of eligible program costs. There are hard costs, which are costs related to the actual construction or rehabilitation. And then there are soft costs. Soft costs can be developer fees, which are permitted for reasonable and necessary soft costs that are directly related to the financing of acquisition, construction, and/or rehabilitation of housing. Also includes professional fees, such as for architects or engineers, and processing fees, such as staff, overhead costs, attorney's fees, private lender origination fees, credit reports, and so on. I want to make a note about developer fees. First, don't confuse a developer fee with an administration fee. Only one or the other is awarded to you as an administrator. If you intend to take a developer fee, this must have been disclosed in your application for funds, regardless of whether it would be covered by the impact fund or by another source. Additionally, the absolute maximum that you can take for a developer fee is 10% of the total development costs. If you requested and were approved to receive a developer fee, it is considered a part of the value gap funds that were awarded. Your funding agreement does not specify a developer fee. Next, I'll talk about administration fees. Now, an administration fee is permitted for administrators for non-development activities with their grant or deferred loan funds. For example, administrators who provide down payment and closing cost assistance with impact funds can receive an administration fee. Administration fees are not for those that are compensated by a developer or builder fee. An admin fee can be applied to program activities directly related to impact fund grants and deferred loans. Again, administrators cannot receive both an administration fee and a developer fee. The maximum fee currently allowed under the impact fund is $500 unless otherwise stated in your contract agreement. The admin fee can be awarded as a grant that is paid separately from grant funds, or a fee to the borrower that is rolled into the total amount of deferred loan to the borrower. Please consult the procedural manual to see examples of eligible administrative costs, or talk to us if you have any questions. Next, I'm going to talk about layering. As mentioned, we revised our rules to require that you provide written requests for layering prior to layering funds. Now, administrators generally cannot layer or combine impact fund dollars from two separate impact fund awards on the same project unless approved in writing by Minnesota Housing. So, for example, if an administrator received an award in 2014 and another award in 2015, it cannot use funds from both awards on the same project. Administrators are responsible for ensuring that there are sufficient sources to fund a project so that layering does not occur. Please note that combining impact fund dollars with deferred loan dollars from the same impact fund award is not considered layering. So for example, let's say an administrator received grant funds for value gap assistance and deferred loan funds for down payment assistance in its 2015 award. In this case, the administrator may use grant funds to cover value gap on the development of a home and use deferred loan funds to provide down payment assistance to the buyer of that same home. This would not be considered layering if all of the funds came from the same 2015 award. If you find that you need to layer impact funds, you will need to provide your request in writing. There is no specific form to request layering, but you will need to justify why layering is required. For example, you should provide information about the total development costs, the sources to cover the costs, and the gaps, and why there are no other options for covering these gaps. If Minnesota housing staff have approved your layering request in writing, you must indicate both funding agreement ID numbers on the Household Demographic Project Information Form. Submitting one form that combines the two administrators' contributions is preferred. Now, one caveat is that layering funds from two impact fund awards in one unit may be acceptable in cases where insufficient dollars remain under one award to complete a project. So, for example, you intend to provide a home buyer with $10,000 in down payment assistance in the form of a deferred loan. You only have $7,500 remaining in your 2014 award, but also received deferred loan funds in your 2015 award. You may use $2,500 from your 2015 award to cover the difference. You will still need to notify Minnesota Housing and receive written approval from us before layering in this case. Please note that interim loan funds that will be repaid to Minnesota Housing are exempt from the layering prohibition. So, layering is allowed when it comes to cakes, but not when it comes to impact funds. Next, I'm going to talk about the impact fund per unit investment. There is a limit on the total amount of funds that can be invested in each property or household. You cannot exceed 115% of the per unit investment. The per unit investment is defined in your funding agreement. This limit may be a stated amount, or if there is no stated amount, it is the average per unit investment of the award. For example, the average per unit investment noted in your funding agreement is $10,000. The maximum amount of funds you can invest into a unit is $15,000. We understand that in some cases you may exceed the per unit investment. In this case, you must request a waiver in writing as soon as you know that you will exceed the per unit investment limit. There is no guarantee that your waiver request will be approved, so it's important to request it as soon as you suspect you may exceed the limit so that you can plan accordingly. Next, I'll talk about the Tennessen Warning and Privacy Act notice. The Minnesota Government Data Practices Act requires that you supply your clients with the Tennessen Warning and Privacy Act notice when you request private data. Government and tribal entities must use a form approved by their responsible authority. All other administrators must provide a Tennessen Warning and Privacy Act notice using one of the forms on our website, highlighted in pink here. The forms can be found under the Forms and Income Limits section of our website. There are two versions of the Tennessen Warning. The version you use depends on the type of assistance you provide. Please make sure that you are using the correct form. One is for a homeowner or home buyer who is receiving a 30-year impact fund deferred loan that is assigned to Minnesota Housing. The other version is for all other forms of impact fund assistance, including grants and housing infrastructure bonds. The key difference is that in the case of 30-year deferred loans, the home buyer or homeowner's name, address, and amount of assistance is public information, whereas with all other assistance, only the amount of the assistance is made public. Please take a look at each form carefully. You'll see at the top of the form the type of funding that the form is used for. You'll see here there's the Tennessen Warning for the 30-year deferred loans, and then also the Tennessen Warning for use with all other impact fund assistance. Next, I'm going to talk about requesting funds. First, you'll need to fill out a Request for Funds form. The form is found on our website under the Forms and Income Limits section. Right here, highlighted in pink. Please note that you will have to have executed your 2015 funding agreement and satisfied any additional requirements noted in your funding agreement before you can request funds. This is the Request for Funds form. On the first page, you'll need to enter the type of impact fund dollars that are requested. that's highlighted in the bottom pink here. Double check to make sure that you are requesting the correct type of funds. For example, you cannot request grant funds if you are only awarded deferred loan funds. You will also need to include information about your project address. The form only allows you to enter one property address, but if you are requesting funds for multiple addresses, please provide a separate attachment listing all of the addresses for which you are requesting funds. If the funds requested are for a completed unit, please also submit the household demographic form for that unit. Finally, don't forget to enter your funding agreement number at the top of the page here. On page 2 of the form, Page 2 of the form provides information about the disbursement as well as requires your signature. Make sure that after completing the form, you sign the form certifying that you've started the activity for which you are requesting funding. You should also make sure that your disbursement instruction information is correct. Disbursement amounts will depend on the award size and the funding type. Funding amounts that are disbursed will depend on the size of your award. If your award is less than or equal to $50,000, we generally disburse 100% of the funds when requested. If your award is over $50,000, we will disburse a portion of your awarded funds. We also disburse based on the type of funds. In the case of deferred loan funds, these will be disbursed unit by unit. In the case of grant funds, we may disburse up to a third of the funds available upon request and approval. After the first third has been used and reported, you may request another third. When you demonstrate that a significant portion of the award has been used to provide assistance to eligible households, we will disburse more funds. Minnesota Housing reserves the right to disburse funds on a more conservative basis. Please consult us and your grant agreement with any questions about disbursements. Now I'm going to pass it on to Leanne, who will discuss deferred loan documents.
Hi there, my name is Leanne McKenzie, and we're going to talk about deferred loans. Administrators who have received deferred loan funding will need to submit additional documentation. Not all of you have received deferred loan funds, so please bear with me as I go through the requirements for those administrators who have received these funds. The loans are serviced by AmeriNational, but all documentation should be submitted to Minnesota Housing, and I will then forward them to the servicer. The documents you are required to submit can be found on the Deferred Loan section under Forms and Income Limits. The Deferred Loan Closing Instructions includes the documents needed for closing an impact fund deferred loan as well as the document submission requirements. You will notice that for the assignment of mortgage form, we are directing you to the Minnesota Department of Commerce website. As noted in this instruction sheet, please submit the household demographic form immediately after the closing. This indicates to Minnesota Housing that the funds are being utilized. Nick will be giving you some instructions on filling out this form. The recorded documents may be submitted later. It is not necessary to send in copies of the unrecorded documents. You can wait until you receive the recorded documents and submit these as a package along with the original Impact Fund mortgage note, which has been endorsed to Minnesota Housing. I would like to mention number 6 on the deferred loan closing instructions. You are now required to submit a closing disclosure, HUD-1 or HUD-1A with a deferred loan. The transmittal form on the right side of the screen you'll see is a deferred loan transmittal form. Please use this when submitting the loan documents. Please note that there are 2 types of deferred loan documents, a mortgage and note document used only for those who have an FHA first mortgage, and the other covers owner-occupied rehab assistance and affordability gap with an RDVA or conventional first mortgage. Next is the Impact Fund mortgage, and this is a fillable form. It's a good practice to refer to our website to make sure you are using the correct version of the form. The second and third line distinguishes the correct type of form. Also make sure you are entering the correct impact fund agreement number, as some administrators may have multiple deferred loan awards open at the same time. This mortgage gets recorded along with the assignment of mortgage. You may retain the originals for your records and send copies to Minnesota Housing. As noted in the deferred loan closing instructions, in cases where a borrower has an FHA insured first mortgage, the administrator needs to wait to assign the deferred loan to Minnesota Housing until after the borrower's first mortgage has been insured by FHA. Administrators need to be in contact with the first mortgage lender to ensure that the impact fund deferred loan is not assigned to Minnesota Housing before FHA insurance is in place. Next is the impact fund mortgage note. This is also a fillable form. Again, be sure you are using the correct version of the form and are entering the correct impact fund agreement number. On the last page of the note is where you will endorse it to Minnesota Housing. The original endorsed note is submitted to Minnesota Housing and save a copy for your records. Here's the impact fund assignment, which is the assignment of mortgage form 20.3.2 that you will find on the Minnesota Department of Commerce website. This form also gets recorded. You may retain the original for your records or send a copy to Minnesota Housing. Some common mistakes I see on these documents include the wrong impact fund agreement number or no number at all, different dates on the note, mortgage or assignment, or the original note has not been endorsed to Minnesota Housing. If there are mistakes on the recorded mortgage or assignment, you will need to file corrections, which will cost you additional fees. It is best to make sure the documents are correct before closing and recording. If you have any questions regarding these deferred loan documents, please don't hesitate to contact me. Next, we're going to talk about the extension request form. This is also found on our website. We do take a critical look at extension requests. Many administrators have been diligent in completing their awards in a timely way, for example, before or within the 20 months have passed from the effective date of the award. However, in the event that the administrator can justify why you have had a delay with building or getting the program implemented, for instance, not all of your constructed rehabilitated units have sold, or there are closing dates that are set up that are close to the expiration date of the award, you may request up to a 6-month extension. Request your extension prior to expiration. We do not automatically grant extensions, and we can deny extensions and deobligate or recapture funds. If it is your first extension and you can easily demonstrate significant work in progress in completing the required unit count, it will be looked at more favorably. Hard investments in a project is best, such as demonstrating that construction has been completed and the remaining home or homes are up for sale. Some unacceptable extensions include when work on the project or program has not started and homes or lots have not been acquired and construction begun, or when eligible homeowners from a program pipeline have not yet been identified. If it is a second extension request and the administrator has not shown any progress since the last extension. Now I'm going to turn it over to Nick, who will discuss reporting requirements and audits and monitoring.
Hello everyone, Nick Betcher here. As Leanne mentioned, I will be talking now about reporting and monitoring, and this will finish up the slideshow portion of our webinar today. To find several standard reports required with the Impact Fund program, navigate to the Reporting tab on our Impact Fund webpage. Several critical documents shown here are the Household Demographic and Project Information form and the Annual Report Closeout form. All administrators should be familiar with these forms as they are required important reporting tools. You'll only need the bond proceeds certificates if you've been awarded housing infrastructure bond proceeds. And we should have the 2015 certificate posted to our webpage in the near future. As I'm sure by now many of you are aware, we've revised our household demographic and project information form. It now has many more moving parts, and these are designed to help ensure accuracy and consistency in reporting. I'd like to take some time now to walk you through several examples of how to complete this form based on the type of activity your organization is completing. So, as I mentioned, our forms can be found on the Impact Fund webpage, and click the plus button to expand the Forms and Income Limits section. Navigate to the Household Demographic and Project Information form. We do recommend that you check this website whenever you need to access a form, particularly this household demographic form, as we are in the process of working through any identified issues with it. So the first example I'll start with is going to be an owner-occupied rehab deferred loan program or a community fix-up loan write-down program. And my organization today is going to be called ABC Community Development. Now many of these fields are required, and you won't be able to save this form until certain information is entered. Activity type is a particularly important piece of information for us to get. And as I mentioned, in this case, we'll be starting with an owner-occupied rehab loan program example. Typically, our deferred, in most cases, the owner-occupied rehab programs involve deferred loan financing. So I will select that yes, this borrower is receiving a deferred loan assigned to Minnesota Housing. A borrower's social security number is only required for deferred loans assigned to Minnesota Housing, and as I mentioned in this case, our borrower is receiving a deferred loan assigned to Minnesota Housing, so I'll enter their fake social security number here. And in this example, some work was needed to 400 North Sibley Street in Cloquet. The appraised value and purchase price are not required fields for owner-occupied rehab. if you have information on the appraised value, or if, for example, your program sets a loan-to-value limit, you may want to enter that appraised value here. And phone number is a relatively recent addition to this form. We're asking for that so we can forward it in cases where a loan is assigned to Minnesota Housing. We can forward the borrower's contact information to our servicer. And as I mentioned, this is owner-occupied rehab, and when that is selected, you'll notice that certain information is no longer visible. That doesn't apply to that type of activity, so it'll focus our attention on information where we may need to, or those fields where we may need to enter something. So in this example, our borrower is getting some new windows and perhaps a new roof for $12,000. And we have a administration fee of $400 in this example for a total rehab cost of $17,400. And again, in this example, we have a match from some city CDBG funds. So that's a pretty straightforward, simple project and example of how to complete this form for an owner-occupied rehab project. We've added some instructions on saving and sending us this form, so the only way we'll be accepting these is electronically, and we have a file name convention we'd like you to use, which is to enter your administrator name underscore the award ID number underscore borrower last name. And we've added this feature to save this to your system automatically using that file format. So you'll notice we have the organization name, award ID, and borrower last name here. Now I'll modify this example a bit to one where we'll be doing a community fix-up write-down loan instead of a deferred loan. Under the community fix-up, when it's partnered with the impact fund, typically impact fund grant dollars are used to write down the interest rate on a community fix-up loan. And if the going rate for a fix-up loan is 5.99%, and we are discounting that by 3%, and as in this example, then our resulting mortgage rate would be 2.99%. If we assume 15-year term, that would be 180 months. And this discount amount, you'll need to confirm with our property preservation, also known as our home improvement team, to confirm exactly what the write-down amount is. We have included a calculator to estimate that, but again, that's solely an estimate, so the final figure comes from our property preservation team. That's it for a deferred loan example. We'll switch next to an acquisition, rehab, resale, or new construction example. So we have a feature built in here to clear the project information from this page. Section A, the other worksheet, has a similar feature, but I'm going to leave this information as it is for this example, so I don't have to re-enter that. I will change this, however, to a different type of activity. Since we don't have a loan assigned to Minnesota Housing in this example, I will remove borrower's social security number. In this example, they are getting a Minnesota Housing first mortgage for $84,000 on a house with a value of $110,000, which is also their purchase price. Housing ratio is an important field here as well. So any of these grayed out fields, such as land acquisition costs, are not applicable to acquisition, rehab, resale, and that's why they're grayed out here. But we do have some other information to enter for this example. Property acquisition cost to the organization of $85,000. Some electrical work. Plumbing. Interior finishing. And that's it for this example in the hard cost section anyway. We'll also have holding costs of $5,042. Other professional fees of $6,801. And you'll notice here, total development cost is auto-calculated as hard costs plus soft costs. And value gap and affordability gap need are auto-calculated as well. It is critical that we get all sources of value gap and affordability gap. You'll notice this is highlighted out in red until those sources are entered. So again, we have leverage or match from CDBG. And once all the sources are entered, this section is no longer in red, and you'll see the total value gap matches the total value gap need. The idea is the same for affordability gap, where we need all the sources entered here. Since I have them all entered, it's no longer in red. And here's where you'd enter any construction financing from the impact fund that you used. In this example, I'll say we used 100,000. And I've successfully entered all the information I needed, so I can save this form. The new construction example would look very similar to this, so I'm not going to go through that as in depth right now. Suffice it to say that there's some different fields that apply for new construction in the hard cost section that don't apply in acquisition, rehab, and vice versa. So the last example here is for standalone affordability gap. Clear this section B again. In this example, we'll have a $90,000 first mortgage, 31% housing ratio, appraised value of $123,000, and a purchase price of $120,000. Again, activity type is important, so I'll select that here. Again, this is a standalone affordability gap example. And as you'll see, only the affordability gap need and affordability gap sources are applicable to this type of activity. In this example, we have $13,000 from the impact fund, Minnesota Housing Down Payment Assistance, so that is something like the deferred payment loan or deferred payment loan plus, or the monthly payment loan available with Minnesota Housing First Mortgages. In this example, we have $5,000 from there. Borrower zone funds of $7,000. A developer match or contribution of $5,000. And in this example, Greater Minnesota Housing Fund made available $5,000. So that is the sum of all sources and equals the total affordability gap need. So it's no longer, the section is no longer read out, and we'll see that total affordability gap matches the total affordability gap need. Now, if your award includes grant funds for administration, then you would enter the per loan amount you were awarded here. So perhaps in this example, it's maybe $300. And the warning that pops up here is just to check your contract to ensure that you're entering here only those amounts awarded as grant funds and not anything that's rolled into the loan. If your admin fee is rolled into the loan, you'll include it in the settlement charges to borrower on Section A. So again, that should be everything, and I can save this form now to send it on to Minnesota Housing through a secure method. And one method we have available is the secure file upload tool. So I'll show you that resource here. We have links to it. One link to the instructions, and one link to the upload tool itself. So you'll enter the name of the staff member you want to send this to. Typically, we ask that these go to Leanne. And if I enter that here, then I can get started on the secure upload. And I haven't actually saved this form to my system here, so I won't be able to find it, but this is what the upload tool looks like. So those are 3 examples of the basic types of activity for which you'd be submitting household demographic forms. Next, I'll go through some particulars of the annual report and closeout report, which again is one of the critical reporting tools that you'll use in your administration of the Impact Fund Award. So we send out requests for the annual reports the first week of December. The 2015 round did not have a report due, hasn't had an annual report due yet. We'll be sending out notices for those this December. So section 1 is where you'll enter basic award information such as the name of your organization, known in Impact Fund lingo as the administrator name, the award number, funding amount, project name, and a brief project description. In section 2, it's where you'll list all completed projects where work has been completed and a closing's occurred. If you list a project here in section 2, we should have the corresponding household demographic form on file as well. And in section 3, you will list all those projects that are in progress. In progress means for new construction or acquisition rehab projects that the site's been purchased and rehabilitation or construction work has started or you've completed it. You might have a purchase lined up with an eligible home buyer, but the closing has not yet occurred, so that's the key piece. For owner-occupied rehab activity, please consider a project pending until the rehabilitation work is complete. Lastly, section 4 of the report is the closeout section. Except for the signature section here, you do not need to complete this section 4 until the award is complete. Once you've filled out this form and this section, you'll send it to us and we'll reconcile your report with our files. Every administrator does ultimately need to submit this document for each and every award. We encourage you to use this form as an ongoing checklist to keep track of the units you have in progress or completed under your award. If you were funded in October 2015, we'll ask you to submit a 6-month progress report for each of those awards. The reporting requirements for this progress report includes an updated Impact Fund Annual Report closeout form to show all your pending or closed projects. And if you have no pending or completed units, you'll need to fill out a supplemental form to let us know the reason that little or no progress has been made and what you're doing to boost production moving forward. Remember, when reporting, it's all about the details, details, details. Moving on now to audits and monitoring. Usually, under monitoring, I'll be the one to come out to your organization. It could be anyone from the Impact Fund team, though. You should expect an email about 2 weeks prior to our visit to schedule the monitoring visit. We select at least 10% of the files from each award completed to monitor. We prioritize those awards that are open or which have recently closed or which we've not yet monitored. We select administrators based on their risk to Minnesota housing. And criteria which we evaluate in determining risk include the age of the outstanding awards or closed awards, the number of open awards, dollar amounts awarded and dispersed, the time since your last monitoring visit, the organization and your experience with administering the Impact Fund, and lastly, timeliness and quality of your reporting. Not only will I be reviewing the file for household eligibility confirmation. I'll also be looking over the administrator and construction files and may visit improved properties. Now under auditing, our quality control team here at Minnesota Housing performs these audits. The audit team requests a file from you directly, not through the impact fund staff. Any audit findings they have will need to be addressed with the audit staff member reviewing the file, not with impact fund staff. So some of the differences between audits and monitoring. Under an audit, an individual project loan file is reviewed, whereas under monitoring, we're looking at an entire impact fund award or several awards. Audits are done by our audit team, whereas monitoring is conducted by impact fund staff. Either can occur at any time. Audits are usually of one or a handful of loan files, regardless of the award under which those loans were made. Our audit team reviews compliance with the Impact Fund Procedural Manual as well as standard lending practices. Monitoring involves a review of administration files as well as borrower and property files to ensure compliance with multiple aspects of the program. We're also interested during monitoring to understand the context of your organization's work and the challenges and opportunities you've recognized through your participation in the program. Your feedback does inform our program requirements and the annual RFP process. Monitoring is typically done on site, and this is usually at the administrator's office, and it may include a visit to the development site depending on the phase and the type of the project. Minnesota Housing does reserve the ability to review any and all documentation during the award and the records retention period. Our audit staff monitor loan volume and select a random sample of loans in any given period of time. Under monitoring, monitoring staff and the impact fund staff develop a risk assessment and a monitoring schedule based on the type of criteria discussed earlier. The required documents list really informs the monitoring process. It's our guide to monitoring and should be your guide as well to which documents to keep in each project file. You can find this checklist in the back of our procedural manual. If something on this list is not in your file when we come out to monitor, you should expect a finding. Special note on green communities. During monitoring of new construction and ACT rehab resale awards, we'll be checking to see that a completed intended methods form is in each file and that you have other paperwork as required by green communities, which might include blower door tests, energy audit reports, home energy rating system or HERS reports, radon test results, and lead hazard assessment and clearance reports. The current Green Communities criteria and guide in effect for 2015 awards are the 2011 Enterprise Green Communities criteria and the 2015 Minnesota Green Communities overlay. We've included in this presentation some contact information for our funding partners at the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund and at the Metropolitan Council. And lastly, should you have any questions for us here at the Impact Fund, we've included contact information for each of us. So you've heard from Nira, Nancy, Leanne, and myself today, and please do feel free to reach out to us with any questions or concerns about this presentation or the program.